Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth.
Hello and welcome back to the Family Beacon for this extremely special episode. This is episode 38 of season 3 of this podcast. It's also special because Grace is here in person, in the flesh, so we're not doing the Zoom thing right now, which is amazing and much easier and more fun, hopefully for you as well. And finally, it's special because it's Christmas. Christmas is one of my favorite parts of the year. Some people say that, Easter or the first couple weeks of summer is their favorite time. I have to say, I think that Christmas is my favorite time of year, except when it's not snowing.
I know.
So
such a bummer. We were watching White Christmas last night, which is the ultimate Christmas movie, and they're talking about how there's going to be snow in Vermont.
That's not the ultimate Christmas movie.
It is.
No.
It is.
It's not the ultimate Christmas movie. The ultimate Christmas movie is the Charlie Brown Christmas special from 1965. No. Anyway, continue.
But anyways, I was saying they have no snow in Vermont, and they go there, and they think there's going to be snow, and there isn't any. Same with Minnesota. I came thinking there'd be snow. No snow.
That is the only slightly not ideal thing about right now. So we're hoping for a white Christmas. I mean, there's no chance of that given the forecast. We also know that miracles do happen. So we're celebrating Christmas today. Christmas is extremely important in the life of our faith and of our various families. And so I hope that you guys all have cozy, wonderful, Christ-centered Christmas plans coming up. And that is, of course, why we're wearing our amazing Santa hats, which you can't see if you're only listening. And that's one reason to tune in to the video version of this podcast, which goes out on YouTube, in addition to the audio version that goes out on all Spotify and iTunes and all the other platforms. So, on our final episode of this season, let me give a quick breakdown of what we will be talking about. First of all, Grace will be telling us about how pro-abortion activists in Minneapolis are targeting a pregnancy resource center. Mm-hmm. Then, I will be talking about a court hearing today in St. Paul involving our friends Alliance Defending Freedom and a Minnesota pharmacist who just wants to protect his religious conscience rights. We'll be talking about our stats from this year, who's watching, who's listening, our favorite episodes from this season of the Family Beacon, and finally we'll talk about what's coming next year as we take a break and then come back for season 4. So we've got a lot coming up this episode. Thank you so much again for joining us. Grace, tell us more about this, what's going on in Minneapolis.
Yeah, Moses. So on December 13th, so just earlier this week, pro-abortion activists actually gathered outside a Minneapolis pregnancy clinic, and this one was called First Care, and they actually used a projector, Moses, to shine pro-abortion messages on the residential building above, which is not unheard of. I mean, we've seen attacks like this before. We've seen pro-abortion activists gathering outside pregnancy resource centers a lot in the recent months, and we've kept you guys updated about it. Mm-hmm. But these activists were with the Minnesota Abortion Action Committee, and some of the messages read, "Fake clinic, anti-science, anti-choice." And then another one read, "This clinic," air quotes, "is anti-abortion." And then this Minnesota Abortion Action Committee actually posted pictures on X of it, kind of bragging that they had gone out and done this with their activists. Mm-hmm. And they said, quote, "The truth is out about First Care and their anti-abortion agenda. Last night, we rallied outside of this predatory CPC located near the University of Minnesota campus. Hashtag abortion is healthcare," which I just want you to notice the language there. Predatory. This clinic is fake, is anti-science, fake clinic, all these things, totally unfounded, of course, which we'll actually get into because this pregnancy resource center specifically is part of New Life Family Services, and it's called First Care. And you guys, they're not only a pregnancy resource center that provides amazing resources to parents, diapers, free wipes, free clothes, but they also provide counseling for post-abortive women, post-abortive fathers, and mothers, of course, and they are also an adoption agency.
So there's nothing fake about it.
No, there's nothing fake. They offer so many amazing options for women, for mothers, for dads, and there's nothing fake, like you say, and there's no misinformation in this clinic, everything is completely supported by private donors. So no patients have to go in and pay for anything.
Mhm.
Completely funded by private donors, which is awesome. So this very same organization, New Life Family Services, we love them. They
Mhm.
have multiple clinics throughout our state. But one of their other locations this year, you guys, was actually vandalized. It was another one in Minneapolis. And we had Tammy Coker, who was their executive director, on the podcast. So you guys can actually go ahead and watch that if you want to learn more about their other clinic that was vandalized. But I really want to tie this together with why this is happening. One of the reasons why this is happening is because our very own Attorney General, Keith Ellison, issued a consumer alert earlier this year that accused pregnancy resource centers of, quote, misleading, misinforming, or deceiving people. And his alert, of course, relied not on any pro-life written reports, but only on pro-abortion advocacy organizations. So our Attorney General goes and issues this, which we've already discussed in the podcast, but issues this consumer alert saying pregnancy resource centers are super dangerous. They're misleading. They're misinformation. They provide misinformation. And then what happens? Pro-abortion activists are going and shining signs and vandalizing clinics and saying...
I actually have breaking news, Grace.
Breaking news.
So I'm issuing a statement right now. I'm issuing a consumer alert. And my consumer alert is regarding the group Minnesota Abortion Action Committee. And I wanted to let the public know through the venue of this podcast, I'm not an attorney or a general or an attorney general. So take this for what it's worth. But they are shining signs onto this building, which are misleading, misinforming, and deceiving people.
Yep.
Because this message says fake clinic, anti-science, anti-choice. None of those things are true. This is a real clinic where you can get real health services, as Grace has discussed, for free. It is not anti-science. They, in fact, use science to perform those services, such as ultrasounds, for example, and pregnancy tests. It is not anti-choice. They want to support your choice. For example, your choice to give a child up for adoption. They will. They provide services for that, as Grace has mentioned, and she may go into that more. The only choice that they're not supportive of, and this is, I guess, what they're all why they've got their undies in a twist about, is the choice, so-called, to end the life of your child. That is the choice that Grace and I and others are not in favor of. Many, many millions of people in this country think that that's not a legitimate choice at all. So I wanted to issue that consumer alert.
I'm so glad you did that for our audience.
misleading practices. I also wanted to say our church, my church, is just down the street from this clinic. We've supported them
That's awesome.
before, and I personally have seen. I've gone in there and at that particular location, and I've seen how amazing it is, and that people are being blessed there.
They are super amazing, and I just wanted to let you guys know where you can find their work if you're interested in volunteering. They need volunteers. It's nlfs.org. nfls.org. So go ahead and check them out.
You said it wrong the second time.
Did I really say it wrong? NLFS. No, I think I said it right both times.
You didn't, because I'm right here and I heard you.
Okay, guys.
But if you want to argue about it, that's okay.
Anyways, we'll have to rewatch the tape. Maybe I was wrong. But go check them out. They're awesome. We also have it linked in the description. Again, volunteer at your local pregnancy resource center, whether it is New Life Family Services or not. We need to support them. I want to end this part of the episode just by reading a quote from the executive director, Tammy Coker. Again, we had her on the podcast. She's awesome. She said, despite protests, threats of violence, and other challenges, we remain committed to delivering holistic and compassionate services to women and families we serve, which I think is awesome.
Absolutely.
Again, this attack just shows how, quote, pro-choice activists are really just pro-abortion. It's what Moses highlighted. It's what we really want to highlight. They're not actually about giving women choices to choose life, or else they would love places like New Life Family Services. They're really just about one quote-unquote choice. That's abortion. So support your pregnancy resource center because we choose life.
Absolutely, Grace. And that is so important. I think if your church is not supporting a pregnancy resource center, that's something that you as a parishioner can probably change. Go to your pastor, elders, etc., and say, this is something we really need to be doing. And I have a feeling that they will be receptive to that. So again with the abortion issue, we heard this is now a few years ago. I think this was during the pandemic, when a pharmacist in Aitkin, Minnesota, refused to prescribe an abortifacient medication. And we'll talk more about that. And his religious freedom, since that point, his religious freedom rights, his right as a pharmacist not to prescribe a medication which he believes ends the life of a child in the womb. His rights have been attacked and attacked and attacked. And the latest part of that saga is happening today at the Minnesota Court of Appeals in St. Paul. In fact, it's probably still happening now as we're filming this episode. So I'm going to read a little bit from our allies at Alliance Defending Freedom, their press release on this. ADF attorneys are representing Minnesota pharmacist George Bedeau, who was sued because of his conscientious objection to dispensing a drug that can cause an abortion, an action that violates his religious beliefs. A jury found that Bedeau did not discriminate based on sex when he abided by his sincere religious beliefs that life begins at conception. ADF attorneys filed a brief in August supporting his constitutional right to work in accordance with his faith. And now here's a quote from Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel Rory Gray. No one should be forced to violate his conscience in the workplace, and that includes dispensing drugs that can cause an abortion. Mr. Bedeau politely informed the customer that his personal beliefs precluded him from dispensing the drug, but he offered to help her get the drug from another pharmacist, which she would have been able to do at the same pharmacy. Mr. Bedeau is a Christian who believes that an embryo is a new human life, and as such, taking a drug that prevents an embryo from implantation in the uterus ends a human life. We are urging the court to affirm the jury's verdict and trial court's decision, which respected Mr. Bedeau's constitutionally protected freedom to act consistent with his beliefs while at work. Unquote. Bedeau was a pharmacist at Aiken Pharmacy, where he was asked by a customer to dispense the drug Ella. Perhaps you've seen this drug advertised. It is sometimes called emergency contraception, or I think it's similar to, or perhaps the same as the morning after pill, but with different branding. However, if you believe that life begins at conception, then there is a chance that this pill will stop the development of a embryo growing inside a woman's body and, in fact, kill that embryo. Quote, despite Bedeau's efforts to accommodate the customer and her ability to get the drug the next day, the customer sued in an attempt to punish Mr. Bedeau for his conscientious objection. So this is just not something that should be happening in our country. People of all faiths should have the protections in their professional and personal lives, something that goes against your deeply held religious beliefs. So this is not something that's okay. Like the Bill of Rights to the Constitution includes ironclad religious freedom protections.
Absolutely.
We've talked about that many times, including with Renee Carlson just last week on the podcast. If she were here, she'd be saying the same thing. So I think we need to pray for Mr. Bedeau and for Alliance Defending Freedom. We need to be thankful that attorneys like Renee and our allies at Alliance Defending Freedom are standing up for people's religious and conscience-based rights. It's so important. Now, this is our legal system. This is the third step. A jury found Mr. Bedeau not guilty of sex-based discrimination, but now it's at the Court of Appeals because the well-funded pro-abortion side is appealing because they do not want doctors and pharmacists to have that right. They want every doctor and every pharmacist to be forced to prescribe a medication which they believe will kill or could kill a child in the womb. I mean, just let that sink in.
And it's a slippery slope too, Moses, because this could happen with a plethora of other things, not to mention just the abortion pill. I mean, once you start saying that the government is able to force anyone to dispense whatever drug, then what are we left with?
Absolutely. You're I think the next logical step as you're saying that is so-called gender affirming care, which is actually extremely damaging. Yep. So you could be forced as a pediatrician, for example, to dispense puberty blockers and cross-sex or wrong sex hormones to a child, because to not do so, rather, would be quote unquote sex discrimination.
Right.
So it's extremely important that Minnesota courts continue, and courts around the country, this is at stake all around the country, that courts uphold the right to religious freedom.
So we'll keep you posted on this case specifically. Watch our social media. Keep tuning into the podcast. We will keep you updated. Moses, I did want to talk about some of the highlights of the podcast over the last year for our audience. A lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from our Spotify Wrapped, which is always so fun to flip through.
It is.
And then some of the things are also from, our YouTube, because of course Spotify Wrapped doesn't include YouTube stats. But I'll be interested to get your reactions on this. Our top streamed episode, do you have any guesses on what it would be?
Man, there's so many. Like, I should say, if we haven't already said this, we did more episodes this season for a third season than any previous season. 38. This is our 38th and final episode. So we put out a huge amount of content and a ton of information out there. And we're really glad that you guys have stuck with us. And in fact, I believe our viewer stats and listener stats continue to go up, which is amazing. And that is, I hope, because you guys appreciate this content. I hope you're sharing it with family and friends. But no, to answer your question, Grace, I don't know what episode.
Okay, so our top streamed one on Spotify again was losses and wins from the 2023 legislative session.
Okay.
So that would include, everyone listening, but not people watching. And I think that the reason that one was so big is because that episode we really just broke down a lot of the things that happened in session. There's a lot of stuff that happened. We couldn't break down every single thing, but we broke down the highlights, the biggest losses and the biggest wins. And I think that was really helpful for people, just in amidst all of the craziness and all the things, just a good summary. This is what happened. And then our all-time top listened / watched episode, this includes stats on YouTube, was actually our Roseville Schools Trample on Parental Rights. And that was actually an October episode 30. So that was super recent.
I'm not surprised by that. I think that by those two episodes being at the top, because it seems like for you guys listening and watching, people are most interested in what we're doing when we're really talking about what's happening right now, when we're bringing you the stories that are happening just at that time, like, for example, presenting the legislation that has been passed in the legislature in a way that no one else is doing, because a lot of people in Minnesota, a lot of news organizations are not approaching this from a Christian angle, and we're doing that. And so I'm glad to see that our focus on that is connecting with viewers and listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's great that we have such a big local bent, because that's what our listeners love. Not that we can't talk about national stuff, because national stuff is really important too.
Yep.
Another thing I wanted to note is that we have a lot of new fans this year, you guys. 76% of our listeners discovered us in 2023.
Wow.
Which is crazy. So we had a huge insurge of listeners this year.
That's awesome. Well, okay. Well, I'm going to have to do a shout out to those who've been here since 2021.
Yeah,
you guys are the OG.
Truly. Yep, we've continued to improve our quality. It's great. We love our videographer now. She's doing an awesome job. So shout out to our videographer, Christine, also.
Absolutely.
Because she has just done an amazing job making the quality of our video so crisp, so awesome, and our audio. She's just great. So shout out to her. She probably helped us get a lot of those listeners.
Absolutely. Like when you go on YouTube and you see a really quality thumbnail, you click on it as in 1080p and like the lighting is right and and the sound is good, you're so much more likely to keep watching and come back for more on a different weeks than when it's like, you go on these videos and it's filmed with a potato and it's like poorly edited.
It's so funny.
Yeah. So Christine has made this such a professional endeavor, and she has pushed us to be better in front of the camera, to be honest with you guys. Yep.
So stay tuned for even more updates on season 4. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, our podcast was shared by direct link, text, and X. So that's like usual, but that's awesome. People are sharing it in different ways.
Yeah.
Our most shared episode, though, Moses, was Live from the Front Lines, Fighting the Kidnapping Bill. That was episode 10. That was awesome. I'm going to talk about that more later because that was one of my favorite episodes. Our followers, again, up 65%. And we created 1K minutes in 2023, which is crazy.
1,000 minutes of content, not including everything that you've done on Instagram.
Right.
Not including all the other videos that I've helped make. Wow.
Yeah, so 1K, that's a lot, you guys. And I also just wanted to give a shout out to our season 3 guests because we love our guests. We had Tammy Coker from New Life Family Services. Again, we mentioned her. She's awesome. And we talked about her pregnancy clinic that was vandalized in Minneapolis. Moses had Representative Walter Hudson on just recently, and that was just a great episode. Highly recommend that. He's just such a smart guy, honestly. I was jaw drop when I watched it.
Yep.
And then we also had abortion survivor Melissa Oden on the podcast. Moses interviewed her a few months ago, and she was also incredible. And we also had amazing in-house talent. We had, Jeff Evans, incoming CEO. We had John Helmberger, retiring CEO. Becca, our acting director of policy, and Renee, of course, of True North Legal. So we're just surrounded by amazing talent and amazing guests, and we're super excited. We have some awesome guests lined up for season 4. Moses, I did want to talk about our favorite episodes of season 3.
Absolutely.
Tell me your favorite episodes.
Well, this was just a few weeks ago, but
Mhm.
like sitting here with Walter Hudson there,
Yes.
like I was just like, he was thinking and talking about things, specifically Christians engaging in the
Mhm.
political sphere in a way that I really have not heard a ton of people talk and think about these things. Obviously, not only as an elected leader is he, just voting the right way, and not only is he an intelligent person, he has put so much thought into the connection between his theological beliefs as a Christian
Mhm.
and his work in the public sphere. And I just, I think don't ignore Walter Hudson. Like, that guy is he clearly has well, I don't know if he's going places. That's going to be up to him. But what I'm saying is, if he wants to continue his career in public service, I think he is one of the most grounded people working in politics that I have ever met. And so I learned so much. I learned so much from that
Mhm.
episode. From just, I'm still thinking about some of the stuff he said about how Christians should be engaging in politics and how we shouldn't. And he's not just a rah rah rah, let's kill all the enemies type of person. I think people think that's what he's like, but he's so not that way. So if you haven't watched that episode, revisit it. Maybe even share that with people who you think who are maybe despairing about our political engagement in Minnesota, because
Mhm.
Representative Hudson is not despairing about it. And if he's not, I don't think of any reason why we should.
Absolutely.
So what was your favorite episode?
Mine, like I alluded to earlier, was the Live from the Front Lines fighting the kidnapping bill. And I
Yeah.
think the reason I love that one so much is we just went on the ground at the Capitol.
Yeah.
Had Christine there with us with the camera. And it was just so much fun to be there and show you guys exactly what was happening. And I think that we had a lot of we did indeed have a lot of good feedback on that. That's why as that was our all-time top, no, sorry, that wasn't our all-time one. That was our most shared episode, all-time most shared episode.
Mhm.
And so for obvious reasons, it was just great to be there in the flesh and see exactly what was happening, and also be here in the office beforehand and just kind of break down it.
Yeah.
And the kidnapping bill was just a bill that a lot of people weren't talking about, and I'm so glad Moses and I were able to talk about it with you guys.
Yeah, I honestly would say that we kind of broke that story.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
it was our policy team who really realized how bad this was, and we were the ones getting the word out
Yep.
about this to our supporters. And although it ultimately passed, I think Minnesotans are still so outraged
Oh, yeah,
by
they
that
are.
fact that we have a good chance of using that in future years as something that we really want to change for
Mhm.
the better, and something we can point to and say, this is what happens when you don't vote, and this is what happens when you don't participate in the process. Bills like this get passed, and that's why we need to participate in the process. We're not California, we're not New York. We need to, if we want, we can win, but if we want to win, we have to fight.
Yep. There's some good in this state, and it's worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
We worked on a end of year brochure, you guys, which is really cool, and it highlights some of the things that we worked on this year. And so we will put that out on our social media for you guys to see,
Yes.
and that's one of the taglines from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to briefly just talk about when we'll be returning, because this is the last episode of season 3. We'll be returning with awesome new edits. We're going to have even increased good camera setups and increased good audio, and maybe some other edits like a new intro. So when we return, it's going to be after Christmas, after the holidays. Moses, do you have anything to add on that?
So the Minnesota legislative session starts on February 12th. I think we can pretty much guarantee that we'll be back in your inbox or wherever you get this podcast before that point, helping prepare you guys for the legislative session. We do anticipate lots, unfortunately, people pushing physician-assisted suicide, gender insanity, abortion insanity, and we need to inform you guys, keep you guys informed. And this is one of the best ways that we can do that through this podcast. So before the next legislative session begins, you'll be hearing from us again for season 4 of this podcast.
That's right. So make sure you go ahead and click the subscribe button if you haven't already, if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure you follow us if you are listening on any of our platforms so that you are notified as soon as we release our next episode. Moses, go ahead and close us with our last verse of season 3.
So our verse today is one of my absolute favorites, so appropriate for this time, and it's such a wonderful passage. I'm going to try not to read every single verse of this chapter because it's so good. I'm in Isaiah 53, starting at verse 1, New King James Version if you want to follow along. Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He has no form or comeliness, and when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Jesus Christ as the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and on him is all of our sin, our shame, our sorrow, and our grief is laid. That is the message of Christmas.
Amen.
It's not just about a baby being born in a stable.
Or
what a
gifts.
cute story. It's not about gifts. It's not about Santa. It is about the fact that Jesus Christ comes to take away our sin by bearing it on himself. So that's why the Isaiah passage is so amazing. It's not it is a passage for the crucifixion and for Easter, but it's also a passage for Christmas. It's this prophecy hundreds of years before Christ that this child would come as a root out of dry ground. And I just love that. I hope that you guys take that with you and think about Isaiah 53. Think about what it truly means, not just a baby born in a manger, but Jesus Christ transforming the world through his incarnation. That is the most incredible thing that has ever happened in this world, period, bar none. And you and I are partakers in that through baptism and through our lives as Christians. So that is what I want to leave us with. And that is our final word of this season 3 of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Guys, thank you so much for coming along for the ride, whether you just discovered the podcast this year, and we hope that you're planning to stick around for next year, if so, or whether you've been with us since the beginning. We know you're there. We thank you so much for watching and listening to this final episode of the Family Beacon podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.